Good evening. Welcome to our monthly agenda setting meeting of the Mayor and Commission of Athens-Clarke County Unified Government. We appreciate your participation and your interest and being here with us tonight, both those who are here in person and those watching us remotely. If you would like an agenda to follow along, they're on the table just to the right of the exit doors. I need to let you know that no final action is taken tonight. Tonight is to discuss the agenda for our August meeting. So no final action is taken, but action will be taken on all items on August 7th at our voting commission meeting. If you have a cell phone or any other electronic device, please turn it off or to silent. There'll be several opportunities for input, citizen input. The first is for a special call session that we have at the beginning of the meeting. The second is during the agenda setting portion of the meeting, which are on the consent items, which are 1 through 6, and then old and new business items 7 through 21, with exception of 10, which has been removed from the agenda for tonight. Citizen input is not accepted at work sessions for staff reports related to Planning Commission recommendations, which are items 13 through 17. There'll be a public hearing on these at our next voting meeting. Rules of Commission allow citizens 3 minutes for comment. There's a timing clock on Ms. Spratlin's desk, and please have your remarks finished before the light turns red. It'll turn yellow at 2.5 minutes, so there'll be no need to interrupt you. If you brought handouts tonight that you want to share with us, if you can hand them to Mr. Berryman, he'll be sure that we get them. So now we'll start with our special call session, and this actually is a voting meeting, so would you call the roll, Ms. Spratlin?
Dickerson. Here. Parker. Here. Link. Wright. Bailey.
Present.
Neesmith.
Present.
Dale. Here. Harrod.
Present.
Gertz. Hamby.
Here.
For some reason tonight, I feel like the room's doing this. Yeah. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to consider the award of contract for telephone system purchase and any other item that may be in proper order. If there's any citizen who would like to speak to this item, and this is to the purchase of voice over, what is it, Jerry?
Voice over Internet Protocol.
Voice over Internet.
Madam Mayor, do we need,
VoIP. Yeah.
do we need to have a suspension of rules vote for this, or?
No, this is a special call meeting.
Okay.
Oh, do we? Oh, to vote we do, don't we? Yeah. But I was just calling for public comment.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
But I need all the help I can get.
That's all right.
Yeah. So is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on this? Okay, seeing none, we'll come behind the rail. And now we need a suspension of the rules.
I'll
If
move
somebody
for suspension of the rules.
And I'll second that.
have a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now we will go to our discussion and deliberation. It's any commissioner that would like to speak to this.
Do we have IT here tonight?
I don't see anybody from IT here. Oh,
Oh, okay. I have one quick question.
sure.
I need to know, I'd like to know if our current handsets are owned or leased.
They're so old, probably nobody knows.
We own them.
We own them? Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you. I'd like to move for acceptance of this proposal.
And I'll second that motion.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a very good financial decision for us to
It
make.
is.
Have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Do I have a motion to enter into executive discussion for threatening pending litigation?
So moved.
Have a motion to have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, guys. That was a lot of business taken care of fast. So we'll go now to our regular agenda setting format. And if our business is not finished tonight by about 8:15, we'll take a break, but hopefully that won't be needed. If there's any citizen that would wish to speak to the consent portion of this agenda, which is items 1 through 6, this would be the time to come to the podium and give us your name and address and let us know what you're speaking to. Okay, seeing none, we'll come behind the rails. Any commissioner that wants to remove an item?
Item 4.
And that'll go to the top of the agenda when we
Item
get
3.
item 3. Anybody else? Okay.
Item 2.
Okay, I think we've skipped the consent agenda tonight. Okay, we will now go to old and new business for those in the audience who would possibly like to speak to us, and that will be any of the items that are items 7 through 21, with the exception of item 10, which has been removed.
Good evening. Tyler Dewey, 1075 West Broad Street. I'll be speaking about which item 10 was removed, so I'll be speaking about item 9.
Sure.
I may still contain references to the Barnett
That's
Schultz
okay.
project, but first of all, good evening. In general, I want to thank Athens, the Transportation Public Works staff, who have done a wonderful job collaborating with Tool Design Group to create more holistic, connected, multimodal projects. And if adopted and implemented, the Barnett Shoals, Chase, Boulevard, Barber, Oneta, Row, and Newton Bridge streets will become safer, more efficient, more comfortable places to walk, ride, roll, bus, and drive. Not only these projects, but when we accept the Bike and Pedestrian Athens in Motion plan, I think it will really extend a new mindset throughout the county. We support the Chase Street project and the Barnett Shoals project, as it was presented off the agenda, for 4 reasons. One, they are plans for people, not for vehicle speed. They're plans that look at the corridor as a place to move people first, not a way for cars to speed through to go to other places. This is, I think, a change in the way that many traffic and transportation projects have been approached, and it's one that I think we desperately need. I think the project, certainly the Chase Street project, will create a lot of more calm traffic. The presence of roundabouts on Chase Street will prevent, hopefully reduce a lot of the speeding that the neighborhood residents are worried about coming up that hill, going through that roundabout. Will let people know that they are entering a more neighborhood environment where there may be kids and families, and then they need to slow down. It creates connected, protected bike lanes and separate paths. I think it's certainly the hardest part of my job, especially to come here tonight after a serious bike crash. And I think many of you knew Dick Field. I knew Dick Field. He was just hit on Saturday on Milledge. He was about as careful and visible and prudent a rider as you can imagine. The fact that the crash happened, struck from behind, it's a reminder that we have to provide safe, protected places for people to ride their bikes. These street designs have real stakes. People can get really hurt. So we have to decide if we want the fleeting, illusory convenience of being able to get somewhere a few seconds faster, or if we want lasting safety improvements. And lastly, the plan allows for choice of people to choose what routes they want best, especially on Chase Street. If you're confident enough to take the lane on Chase, you can ride on a calmer traffic environment, but it also has bike lanes and separated paths for people who don't feel comfortable in that environment. So thank you.
And Tyler, I should have told you it was fine for you to talk about item 10 too.
Okay.
It's basically just temporarily taken off the agenda because we had a good bit of public input.
Absolutely.
And that's for staff to compile it and get it back to us.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And I'm going to let y'all know, since you brought it up, that Dick Field was pretty seriously hurt. I think he's still in intensive care. Jerry, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm told. And he's doing well and complaining.
Yeah. But his family has asked to not have visitors there or at home for the moment. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hey, Tony Eubank, 785 North Pope Street. I'm also here to speak to you about item 9, Chase Street reconfiguration. I have to tell you a funny story. When the Chase Street reconfiguration, as it is now, was first presented, I was flipping through the internet and I came across this one panel cartoon, and it's kind of a grumpy old man sitting on the couch, and it says, "There's only 2 things I don't like: change and the way things are now." And I just, and having watched this discussion going on within my neighborhood, I was just like, wow, how apropos. I think that the Chase Street plan is great, and you know, we had Chase Street redesigned on the fly a couple of years ago. It didn't work, So we hired professionals to do it. They came in, they looked at it holistically. They had public input meetings, they had interviews. They even, Jared from Tool Design even interviewed the crossing guard at Chase Street School, who gave him some great insight. So I think that the plan to move, nobody wants 2 lanes of bike lanes on Chase Street. They don't connect anything. And that's one of the things I like about the bike ped master plan and about this plan. It's looking at an area holistically and saying, okay, how can we most efficiently and safely get people from point A to point B? And I think that we do this with this plan. I think, as Tyler alluded to, the roundabouts will slow traffic. It'll make traffic more efficient. You know, one of the things that the crossing guard said is people are racing to catch the lights. You can hear them racing to catch the lights. Well, if we can slow traffic down without as many lights, then they don't have to race, and it becomes more efficient. So I really like this plan. I think that we should stick with it. And I was having a conversation with Drew earlier, and this is a concept. You know, we're not talking about, except for the lane at the bridge, we're not talking about putting any paint down, but what we're doing is sending a signal that we do care about cyclists. We do care about pedestrians. We are changing our mindset. We are thinking outside the box and looking at an area holistically. If I could make 2 suggestions about the plan, number one, and it's not even about the plan, I would suggest that you move the "Your Speed Is" sign closer to the bridge. As it is now, it's down closer to the bottom of the hill. We've already moved it once. I don't know it costs that much to move the sign, but the speed over the bridge is where the issue is. So move that sign closer to the bridge. And the second thing that I would do is I would put a traffic light at the exit ramp at 441, because I think a lot of people won't use the exit on 441 because there is no light there, and that's an almost impossible left turn to make when there's any traffic. You put a light there, people will get off at 441, come down to College and come up, and it would take some of the pressure off Chase Street. I think what it is right now is we're asking Chase Street to do too much, and it's a narrow road. We can't ask it to do that much. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you and all your other committee members for serving on the bike ped master plan, because that was about a 2-year effort. And I know it's not done yet, but y'all have spent 2 years already, and thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chris Dowd. I live at 245 North Harris Street, number 2. I'm the operations coordinator of Athens for Everyone, and I believe that our organization supports, just any way possible to expand our network of complete streets. So that would include these 2 projects, 9 and 10. And just personally, I'm a fan of roundabouts. I think they're just so much safer. And also that the throughput is actually pretty good. So I guess maybe the speeds would be slower, but then most cars wouldn't actually ever be stopped. So the throughput is actually good. So it's not like they're really slowing down people getting to where they need to go. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd. Anybody else? I don't want to push anybody to the podium, but was anybody planning to speak on the Classic Center issue? Because this is the time we're accepting that input. I just want to make sure y'all didn't get missed.
It's great. Paul Kramer, 431 Greystone Terrace. And I'm just here tonight to speak about item 17. I think there's a really great opportunity for us and for the city of Athens to really look at all of the ways that we use energy throughout that building and save a considerable amount of money putting in new technology. And it's a guaranteed savings program, and one that I think will really make a difference going forward. So thank you for your consideration.
Well, I think we've probably all read it, and it sounds great, Paul. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll come behind the rail, and we're going to take care of the old business item first, and then we'll go to new business, which will include those items removed from the consent agenda. So would any of our commissioners like to start the conversation on item number 7?
Actually, you want to start with 2?
Actually, I was going to do the old business first and then go put that at the head of new business. Anybody got anything to say about item number 7? Yes, sir.
Madam Mayor, just generally regarding the property, folks know that this was a manufacturing facility for decades and had been in disuse for some subsequent decades. for several years, the Heritage Foundation held an easement on some historic components of this property, really hoping that there would be a developer able to come in and make some use of it. I think everybody recognized that, when you have an old crumbling brick facility, some of which had to be totally dismantled just because of structural issues, that there's going to be some flux around it. I remember when the project first came through, kind of in its initial incarnation, there was some question as to whether or not the volume of residential that was planned for the project would really make sense in that location. I think what's happened is that as the developers have gotten into the project itself, they found that some of the uses are more viable than others, and some of that just has to do with the nature of those buildings that they're trying to repair. So I was supportive of this as it came through kind of in the initial round, and I continue to be.
Anybody else have anything to say about that one?
Mayor, I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. So I guess I have some concerns. I'm trying to get there it goes, trying to get my computer to catch up. I still have concerns about the fact that we're reducing residential space for office space. And reading through our agendas tonight, one of our planning commissioners even mentioned in one of the other items we're going to consider tonight that there's too much variability of use for a PD on one of the other projects. The same thing holds true on this one. Typically, a PD, we're supposed to know what's going in. I know with the Kroger, we had to know exactly what they were going to do. In this case, there's just so much variability. And using Planning Commission Kimmon's words, I just don't feel comfortable. We do have a housing shortage. We have talked about needing more housing in town because there's accessibility, easier access for people to get around town when they're in town instead of out where I am, further out. So I'm just really concerned that we're doing that. And I was trying to calculate, I went back through all the requests from 99 until 2018 on the bedrooms, and they've changed up and down, but the last change was from 448 bedrooms to 288. And so again, that's 40%. I don't know. I was trying to figure out what the math is. 40% decrease for residential, space. And I guess I'm just wondering when this is going to end. We keep at they need to finalize, and I'm not comfortable reducing the residential space in town at this point, especially with all the restrictions we have outside of the loop, if you will. And the fact that we have not nailed down, I think on page 2 of the report from staff, it talks about the fact that the options for this property could be group homes, hotels, vehicle repair, medical facility. I mean, it's just really just wide open. It could be anything, and we need to understand how that's going to work within that layout. So I would think that we need to get those nailed down before we approve a request.
Anybody else want to comment on this?
I just make a couple of points, sort of picking up on some of the things that Commissioner Dickerson mentioned. I mean, one is that this property never featured any residential use, so for it to feature some is certainly an increase. In conjunction with that, there is, of course, a large as yet to be planned component of this larger property. So we're really just talking about a subset of the overall property. There's what you might term a greenfield component of the property that would be developed in some future phase. The other thing is that it's not atypical in a planned development for us to have some undesignated commercial spaces. That's just sort of a typical way that they come through. So you've got a shell and you say, okay, well, here's the breadth of opportunity. And then ultimately the leasing agent tries to find somebody who fits within that breadth. Often we have said, okay, there are some specific things we don't want to see that might be in the standard CG zone or the standard CN zone. And I think if commissioners are interested in some of those specific uses, and I know hotel was one of the things that came up at the last meeting, I think that's a worthy thing to talk about, but simply the nature of leasing commercial space is that sometimes you don't know if it's going to be a restaurant or if it's going to be an office.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll now go back to the items that were taken off of the consent agenda. Commissioner Parker, you had the first one.
Yeah, I just wanted to express some support for the revised scope of the sheriff's office audit in particular. I heartened to see that we will be looking into the quality of care provided to inmates, as well as the characteristics of the sheriff's office, which be influencing staffing, and then the care that's then given to women and violent offenders. I was wondering if it would be possible here in the revised scope or in a future audit to also look into the experiences of inmates more broadly than those who are receiving care for chronic illnesses or, or otherwise a part of special populations, and particularly hearing from those individuals themselves as part of the audit, whether that data is currently available through what has been collected thus far, or if moving forward, once the results of this audit are made known, we can look into that as a future step to take. I just wanted to see if those things would be possible.
Put you on the spot, Madam Auditor.
Sure.
Do you have any input into that question
I do.
or thoughts?
I do, Madam Mayor, and thank you. After the audit was initially started, there were some things that we learned that were really important. Towards the very end, we did learn about some matters that deserve to be in the report. However, we were towards the end of the field phase. I was not in favor of slowing down our processing and possibly getting off schedule, and I recommended to the audit committee to allow me to continue on and turn the report in on time, and I would take that one element from the scope and continue to research and initiate interviews. And I think that is what you're talking about, is the very last element of the scope that looks at inmate medical and the care of service that is offered to them. I'm not sure what's going to come out of the audit, but there are some concerns in some respects. It could possibly lead to another audit, but I wouldn't be able to answer that question tonight. But there will be an addendum added to the main report within 60 to 90 days.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that answer your question? Chair Bell, do you have anything?
Anything else related to item 2? Okay, we'll go to item 3, and that was Mr. Neesmith. Ma'am. Mariah, you all right with that sound consent? Yeah. Okay. Mr. Neesmith.
Yes, ma'am. This is the pump station for the amphitheater. So I think this has been sort of a moving story about how this pump station is going to be, at least it has been in my eyes, what it is and where it comes from and what pipes it uses. So I understand that this is going to be connecting to an existing water pipe that used to serve that when it was a water source. Is that right?
So it's a good question, Commissioner. I know a little confusing. So the reservoir used to hold storage for the city, but in today's size of the city, it's really only one day's worth. And so back when the Beecham plant was upgraded, the pipe to the reservoir was severed, the water pipe. So what we're left with was an old water pipe, 20-inch, that runs under the loop. And remembering that, when they were trying to find a way to make it through there, we said, well, the force main doesn't need gravity because you're pushing it through. So we said, well, if it's not bigger than 20 inches, you can just use the existing casing of the water pipe. It won't have any water in it to be able to get. That's the most efficient way to get under the loop. Or you could just require them to tunnel through themselves and go through that cost and expense. But we don't have a use for the pipe. They could use it as conduit, if you will, for the force main pipe.
Okay. And so this will be then connected to our sewer system.
Yes.
Who's going to own that pipe?
We will.
So this is just approval of the pump station and the use of the force main?
It's connecting to our system, basically.
Usually there's a charge associated with the connecting to the sewer system. I think I would have to pay $2,500 to do that. Is there a charge associated with this?
This is unusual. We don't normally do the force main, so I believe they will, yes.
I think that's important to know.
Well, we're not going to pay for any improvements for their purposes. I mean, that would constitute a gratuity, so.
I understand, but if I were to have a company lay a sewer pipe from my house to the sewer, I would pay for that, and then I would have to pay the county $2,500 to hook up.
Oh, just to be clear, they're responsible for the installation, and they're responsible for the connection fees.
The connection fees.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they're not responsible for the connection, they're responsible for the fees, which is something we do.
No, any cost associated with connecting and installing it, they are responsible for.
But I have to pay $2,500 no matter what it costs.
Well, I can certainly find that out for you. They'll be responsible for all cost. I can't tell you what that cost figure is.
Well, hear me.
Yes,
I
sir.
have to pay $2,500, whether it costs $1 or it costs $3,500 for the county to do the work. So it seems that there should be a commercial equivalent to that or something.
I'm almost positive there is, but I can't,
Okay.
it's not committed to memory.
Thank you, sir.
But I will clarify that for everybody.
Okay.
Anybody else have, Ms. Terry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm not an engineer, but my understanding is forced main sewers typically, other people it's difficult for them to tie on. Is this only going to service this amphitheater, or is this going to, is there going to be a possibility of other entities in the future being able to tie onto this sewer? And if so, what does that do for potential development pressures in that part of town?
Well, we have been looking at this because this is the first time we've actually gone past the loop in that area. And as y'all know, and you discussed and talked about, there are some neighborhoods out there that are on septic tanks that are over 25 years old. So just from an engineering perspective, we won't have private tie-ons to the length of force main that goes between the pump and our system, because the pump's the driver. And so there is a potential that we could, and we are looking at, if we were to run some limited sewer service to take the pressure off of that there could be, we could upsize this pipe in question to accommodate future needs.
And so that would be for residences that are presently on septic out there, or?
Yes.
Because
There's-
obviously, I mean, the moment you run, sewer drives development. It's not the other, development doesn't drive sewer, sewer drives development. And so if we start running sewer lines out there, I think we need to be cognizant of what that may end up doing.
Sure.
At 5, 10, 20 years down the road.
So the limiting factor here is that we will own the force main pipe, and then only sewer that's collected by the pump is going to be transmitted through there. Any extensions of sewer past that would come to y'all for approval. We were just trying to be, if you'll remember in the service delivery plan when y'all approved that, are there some localized solutions for serving those folks and getting them on the sewer system? And so we heard loud and clear, we're not interested in development in that area, but we're just trying to find, is there an opportunity here to service some of those folks? And that's something our engineers are taking a conceptual look at right now, and certainly we would come back to y'all with any ideas that we have for your input.
And if we were to attempt to service those people, we can't force them to tie into the sewer. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct.
Okay.
But it would be one of those situations where we would have to put in some collection infrastructure. But when we actually got to the neighborhood, it'd probably be one of those deals where we're working with them. We may go to one of our, if 65% of the neighborhood wants us to take a look at it, we'd run cost estimates. We'd say, well, this is how we might share in this cost. We've got some precedent for that. And the mayor and commissioner are involved in that in plain sight.
Mr. Gerbs?
Sort of following up on Andy's question about not being able to force people to tie in, I think what would end up happening is that in some cases, the septic systems might be so old that people might have no other choice. They've got, you can't quite see it on this map, but if you follow Boley Drive along, it intersects with Freeman Drive, and there are a few dozen duplexes primarily over there. And they're on pretty small lots, so it wouldn't surprise me if they're situated so that they couldn't put another drain field in. And so the only other option for just even maintaining a housing unit there would be to tie on to a sewer line if it was to connect kind of down Freeman to this point or some near point.
Anybody else have a question? Something that Mr. Neesmith said prompted a thought for me that I'd like an answer to. So we have a pipe that goes under the road and we're going to allow them to access that for their force main. Are they going to be using that as a sleeve and putting something else through it?
Yes.
And so how big will the,
20 inches.
so we have a 20-inch pipe, and they're going to put a sleeve in it? Because I was wondering about the liability of an old pipe like that under the road that we would have to service it, so,
Yeah, there would be a brand-new pipe that would be under pressure.
yeah.
Early indications are, for their purposes, it needs to be about 4 to 6 inches, so there is some room for expansion there.
Yeah. Do we know that the pipe that's there is in good shape? Have we
That's what we're looking at right
hammered it or
now.
anything? Okay.
And if you'll note in the agenda session, if that does not prove to be a viable option, then the developer will be responsible for working with GDOT to get under there on their own.
Get something else.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody, Ms.
Well,
Terry?
I wanted to follow up. So since we presently own where the pipe currently sits, but it's going under the loop, so that involves GDOT, do we negotiate with GDOT over this, or will the developer? And if it's us, and there's a cost to that, will that be passed on to the developer?
The answer is yes. To any cost that we incur as part of this will be passed on to the developer. I think we have to get a permit for it. I think it's $100. We would pass that on to them. It's nominal. Because our current permit is for a water line. And even though they're going through the water line, it's going to be a sewer line. We need to get a permit from GDOT to have that happen.
And so kind of following up on Commissioner Neesmith's question a little bit, do we have, I mean, obviously if they can use our pipe, that's going to save them a significant amount of money, I assume, rather than having to drill their own hole. I mean,
Sure.
can we charge them what we're saving them, or some portion of that, and use that money for infrastructure improvement somewhere else?
Sure. They're going to install the pipe. We're ultimately going to own it. But, if you want us to look at the cost of boring and what that would otherwise cost them, we could.
I'd like to know what it is. Just I would like to know what our options are before we make a decision.
Okay.
Mr. Neesmith?
It looks like if we pass this, in item 5 on page 2 of this particular agenda item, it says in parentheses, Public Utilities Department reserves the right to upsize the force main for public purposes. Who are they reserving that right from? Us or the amphitheater?
The amphitheater.
So we're not giving them permission to upsize that force main for public purposes by passing this?
No. But-
Seems to say that.
Well, the incremental cost of upsizing the pipe is fairly minimal versus, the actual installation. And again, the concept of looking ahead to the future is just what we're doing.
Well, I'm just wordsmithing here, so that we don't have unintended consequences. I don't want to pass this if it gives PUD the right to upsize the force main.
Okay.
Okay?
Anybody else? Are y'all happy to leave this on consent, Mr. Gertler?
Just,
No.
I guess, kind of following up
Okay.
on Jerry's point, I guess what the intent, my understanding of the intent is that we would reserve the right for a public purpose to upsize the diameter of the pipe. And so we would be saying, if we need some additional capacity, say to take the load off those existing homes that are right there in the immediate vicinity, we would then say, we may upsize the pipe, not that the developer for some other purpose may.
Madam Mayor? I understand the intent. What I'm guarding against is unintended consequences. If 5 years from now, 10 years from now, PUD wants to upsize that pipe and they come to the mayor and commission and says, oh, you've already said we could. That's what I'm trying to prevent.
So to put in a clause, something like with mayor and commission approval.
Sure.
Gene, I think this one needs to go back to discussion. Y'all through with this one? Okay. Number 4 was Ms. Dickerson.
Thanks, Mayor. So I was reading through the contract, and I pointed this out to the manager this afternoon. And on page 2 of the contract, the attachment, under item 11, we direct in the contract services will be coordinated with the Athens-Clarke County Landscape Management Division. That's for ground maintenance. But under item 9 above, we leave it open for them to handle their solid waste. And I'm not 100% sure, I would like to know before the next meeting, but I would assume that they're being serviced by a front-load dumpster, and we compete for those services against other haulers. So I would like for our contract, if this is our facility, to direct them to use our services instead. And so if we can get that information before then, I'll probably put in a CDO for that to be changed.
So this one will need to come off consent as well, Jean. So anybody else have anything to say about that one? Okay, we'll go now to item number 8, which is resolution changing the official flower. And our sponsor is not here to talk about it. But actually, I think it would be worth trying to decide. I'm having a little voice problems tonight. Who would be somebody with a nice resounding voice to read the resolution? Because I think it's worth the public hearing it. Do I have a volunteer?
I think Commissioner Hamby's our daffodil man.
Are you the daffodil?
Well, yeah.
Please don't refer to me as the daffodil.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Jerry.
You got it?
I got it.
Okay.
Resolution. A resolution changing the official flower of the unified government of Athens-Clarke. Yeah, smooth, huh?
See why I didn't want to do
Yeah,
it?
of Athens-Clarke County from the iris to the daffodil. Whereas on July the 7th, 1946, the mayor and city council of Athens, Georgia, passed a motion to name the iris the city flower of Athens, Georgia. And whereas the mayor and commission of the unified government of Athens-Clarke County now wish to designate a new flower as the official flower of the unified government of Athens-Clarke County. And whereas the daffodil, one of the earliest harbingers of spring, is a symbol of hope, renewal, optimism, rebirth, and new beginnings. And whereas the daffodil is one of the oldest cultivated plants, has ties to our own historical namesake. It is native to the Mediterranean region, was used ornamentally and medicinally by ancient peoples, and is believed to have received its name from the Greek myth of Narcissus. In a community named after Athens, Greece, the great center of learning in the classical world, it is only fitting that our community should designate an ancient flower cultivated by the Greeks themselves as our official flower. And whereas the daffodil is a hardy, self-sufficient plant capable of thriving in the face of almost any obstacle, much like the resilient people of our community. And whereas over 100,000 daffodil bulbs have been planted over the last 10 years in the Athens-Clarke County community to beautify our 10 loop on and off ramps and other public spaces as part of a grassroots partnership with Keep Athens-Clarke County Beautiful, the Unified Government's Landscape Management Division, the Georgia Department of Transportation, and citizen volunteers. And whereas the grassroots effort to begin our daffodil planting project and the continued dedication of volunteers and proponents of this project reflect the spirit of our community, engagement, generosity, and service that is central to our unique culture. And, last but not least, whereas the Mayor and Commission recognize that beautifying our community through the planting of daffodils makes our community safer, healthier, and more livable. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the daffodil be, and it is here designated, the official flower of the unified government of Athens-Clarke County. So resolved this 17th day of July 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Neesmith. I thought we could use a little poetry tonight, and I believe the credit for that wording of the resolution goes to our Commissioner Wright. And
Yes, I believe.
if she had been here tonight, I would have had her read it. So we may have her read it again at the meeting.
Madam Mayor, I thought Commissioner Neesmith read that so well, I'd like to hear it again.
Well, you can read it again.
But it's a beautiful resolution.
It
I
is.
thought the words were worth hearing. So, okay, any discussion on that? We'll move on to.
I think we could put that on consent, can't we?
Oh yes, let's put on. Well, actually, no, we want to vote on it for a specific reason. So,
Oh,
yeah, so I'll leave it on the regular. It'll be the first item under our regular business agenda at the next meeting. Item number 9 is our Chase Street corridor plan. Any discussion? Mr. Neesmith.
Madam Mayor, I do business with some of the industries and merchants out there on Oneta Street. And they know nothing about this. I mean, literally. I was there Saturday, and one of the owners said, what are you doing? What is it? What are you doing? How can this, don't you know we got trucks here? How can these roundabouts possibly, accommodate trucks? And I tried to assure him, but it's not, we did this to them once before. We restriped, and it didn't work because of the trucks. So I'm very reluctant to, I know we're not approving doing the work, but I think we need a little bit more community outreach to the industry in that corridor, who are probably affected positively or negatively by this, maybe more than most.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two questions. One is kind of relates a little bit to what Commissioner Neesmith just said, although I don't have a problem with the roundabouts. But I do note that on page 11 of the PDF, looking at the roundabouts coming off the loop, they seem to be designed in such a way that they're kind of teardrop shaped rather than circular, at least on the inside lane. And just in my experience of going around roundabouts, sometimes people come off a roundabout and they miss their turn, and they have to go all the way around the roundabout to have a second bite at the apple. And I'm not sure that this teardrop shape in the center of the roundabout will help that. So again, I'm not a professional traffic engineer, though I'm quite happy to play one on television. But just in my experience, sometimes you have to go around the roundabout if you've missed your turn, and especially if you've got a long, big, articulated truck or a big truck. I'm not sure that teardrop shape is going to be navigable. So,
Well, what they'd have to do in effect is go over, across the bridge again to come back.
I know, but A, they're not going to want to do that, and B, that's going to worsen the situation of traffic going back and forth across the bridge. And I'm still not sure with a very large truck whether that's a big enough turn radius. But anyway, if somebody that has more engineering knowledge than me, I'm just basing it on experiential knowledge of driving around thousands of roundabouts in my lifetime. The other thing that the other question I do have, though, is, so we've just been talking on item number 7 about allowing for a reduction in residents at Oneta Street and potentially replacing that with commercial activity. And yet my computer's just gone haywire for a moment. So my question is, the designs here that involve Chase and Oneta and all of these other streets in here, I'm assuming were done based upon the original understanding that the Oneta Street development would have more residential activity than what is proposed should the revised PD pass. And so my question is, if we reduce the amount of residential activity at that development and allow for more commercial activity, what does that do for these plans?
Madam Mayor,
Smith, yes.
this may or may not help. Those teardrop roundabouts, there is a way for a truck to do a 360-degree turn, and that is to go to the next roundabout. See that? Now, I don't know if they're going to know that, because they can't turn at the bottom of the teardrop or the top of the teardrop, but go to the next teardrop, and they can get around. But they're going to need to know that. But it's, and I have another question about the interchange with Row Street. There's a truck car wash right there at Row and Chase on the southeast corner there. I don't see a way for a truck to make a left turn into that. I just noticed that. Did you see that, Blaine? There's no way for a truck to make a left turn, even though there's a left turn lane.
Mr. Williams, is
Yes.
there any reason for this to need to be adopted immediately, because this is a plan, it's not, and I know our staff needs to know what they're going to be moving forward on, but there are a lot of questions tonight, and that would also give time. We probably need to individually notify the businesses along there that this is coming up, to give them an opportunity to interact with us.
Well, what we can do is, certainly, I mean, we want y'all to obviously be comfortable to move forward. Why don't we start, though, with us answering your questions, and also telling you who was invited to the public forums and how they were invited. Just give you some background information, and then
Yeah.
just hearing back from y'all, we can decide whether you want to move forward or try to accumulate some more.
And we
Just
could- we could pull- we
understand,
could- yeah.
it's kind of irrelevant who was invited. It's really who attended.
Well, okay.
And-
Well, that's what I
and-
meant.
And, you know, a lot.
Comprehensively.
I know a lot of people didn't, that this affects a lot, so just.
Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate the manager's comments about finding out better answers and coming back to us. I attended a meeting, gosh, probably a year ago, when there was reaction to the existing striping, and there were a lot of the business owners there, and they were pretty upset because they felt like they had not been informed. And I know there's been a lot of public input on this, and I know that staff has reached out to the business owners, but I do think that Jerry's got a reasonable comment that even if folks were invited, that there may be some of those business owners who did not know about it or did not attend and are probably going to feel like they didn't have the opportunity for input, even though we had lots of public input. So we just may want to consider that, maybe a session where we specifically target some of those business owners so we can get the information to them and get feedback from them. Because they were ready to, it was like a lynch mob a year ago. And I'm not at all saying that our staff has not tried to get public input. They have.
Sure.
But we need to still get that message to some of those business people. Thank you.
And yes, ma'am.
Well, I had another question I wanted to try to understand, and this is just as a result of us just having our meeting on Barnett Shoals. In the report from staff, it says Barber Street between Chase and Boulevard, there's going to be a shared use path. And I guess I'd like to understand what that is defined as. Is that a bike, ped, shared path? So just define that. And then the other issue, the other question I had was, again, even though we're not going to talk about it tonight, Barnett Shoals lane reconfiguration called for same-side dual, I don't know what you call that, but bike lanes that are right next to each other instead of splitting them apart. And I'm just kind of curious why that was that looked at for Chase, and if not, why, and why is it being proposed for Barnett Shoals versus, I mean, I'm just kind of curious as we're working through that. And I know we're not going to talk about it tonight, but if staff could give some insight on that, that'd be good.
Okay.
Understand.
Well, I'm concerned about how many questions our commissioners still have on this, and the issue that Jerry brought up about the public. And if y'all will trust me on this, I'll talk with our staff, and we may possibly pull it. I may pull it off the agenda for now, because we've already pulled Barnett Shoals, and that was because of the volume of public input, so that our staff could assimilate it for us. So Mr. Williams and I and staff will work on that between now and meeting. Okay, item number 11 is the Whitehall Road at South Milledge Avenue improvements. We're going to get lots of roundabouts, Mr. Herod.
Good.
Any discussion on this one?
Yeah, I had some questions I asked the manager about earlier today. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of the desire that we have some art or signage and some landscaping in that area, since that's a major thoroughfare for a lot of people coming, traveling either into Oconee or out of Oconee, or from the university, depending on what direction you're coming. It's my understanding that that is phased in, that there will be a point at which this is just the contract for developing, the construction of the roundabout, but that there will be a piece of this, at which point we'll bring in the cultural affairs, I guess, group and or us or whatever into that discussion about how to landscape and sign it, because I know there's concerns. I know we had a discussion, I don't know if it's a work session, about walls and, you know, how high things can be and what might distract somebody as they're trying to enter into it. We don't want to cause problems. So I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page and that will be considered.
So if I might, so the walls are already integrated into the design. You know, and there's some granite, I think, features to that, you know, and if there was any signage to that, we can always put that on after the fact. But there were questions about the art, and so what we'll do is, let's just go ahead and construct it. We'll mulch the inner circle, and towards the end of the construction, we will, in concert with Transportation and Public Works, you know, research the best practices on how art might need to be breakaway in case of an accident, and get with, I did speak with Mark Beachuk with the Cultural Affairs Commission. They're interested in helping. We've got a precedent for a process for them to help solicit proposals for art and then bring it to you for final approval. So that's what we would suggest.
Okay.
Everybody. Mr. Harry.
Thank you. Well, just to follow up on Commissioner Dickerson's point, I mean, I think one of the discussions we had was the issue of putting something in the center of the roundabout. And I know that initially the response was, well, we're not allowed to do that under GDOT, but I think we did some more research and found that there are some communities that have done that. And to me, you know, that seems to be would be a good location for some kind of public art. Then I would not want to rule it out straight out of the gate, you know. So I think that needs to be part of the consideration.
No, that's where we're talking about, in the middle.
Yeah, this bid award doesn't exclude any public art from it.
No.
Anybody else? Are y'all okay for that one to go on consent, or, okay? Oh, okay, we don't have the bids yet, so that'll leave it. Okay, item number 12 is South Lumpkin Street at Baxter Street, and this is approval of a preliminary plan. And I'm not sure whose district this is, but anybody want to discuss it or talk about it?
I think it's Commissioner Wright's district.
Yeah. Okay, well, we will move on then. 13 is the red light running photo enforcement system. Anybody want to start with a discussion on that? Have any questions? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Dickerson.
Yeah, I guess I just want to bring up, I want to give kudos to staff for going back and looking at this when we raised some questions about it back a year or so ago, that staff took time to go back and evaluate. Because, I mean, you know, we do all sort of get in the same, you know, we get in a rut where we just do the same thing we've always done. And the fact that traffic light has greatly reduced, there's been a lot of crashes prior to this light going in, but it's greatly reduced those. In fact, I think our report said there's no red light related traffic crashes at that intersection of West Broad and Alps for 2 years. That's pretty significant. So maybe we've trained everybody, and now we can use it somewhere else to train other people. So
For a while.
Yeah, for a while. So I think that's fantastic, and I appreciate staff doing that. So.
Well, if nobody else has I have a question too, and it's about cost recovery of the initial investment we make. Will we get that back through the fining process, or?
Yes, and it goes into its own account, which is used to maintain the system going forward.
Good.
It's not a moneymaker.
Yeah. But this is what I wanted to just get out, because
Sure.
I don't want the public to think that we're doing this to make money off of them, because we're going to have to invest $300,000 to get it started. So.
This is to encourage safe behavior.
Absolutely.
And I do appreciate the insightful questions by the mayor and commission to have us revisit this.
Yeah. Are y'all happy for that to go on, Mr. Harrod?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a quick, I would reiterate, I think a lot of people in the public think that red light camera programs are about making money.
Yeah.
We actually often, I mean, I know it's done on a year-by-year basis, but on many years, we actually lose money on this rather than making money. And and as the manager pointed out, it goes into a special revenue fund that is dedicated solely to replacing the equipment. So I think that's important for the public to understand. My question was, so the agenda report talks about looking at putting up a light on US 29 at Hull Road, which after the intersection of Gaines and Barnett Shoals had the highest red light running crashes. But we have to get permission from GDOT. Do we know how long that will take? And in the interim, is the plan to leave the red light camera up at Alps and Hawthorne and Broad, or what's the timing on that, or the sequencing, I guess is.
Well, the Alps permit ends at the end of the year.
Okay.
And prior to that, we'll go ahead and initiate the process so that we can go ahead and move over. We'll get the new permit and be ready to move once that permit expires.
And do you have an idea of how long it will take to get the permit for 29?
Well, we'll do that while the ALPS permit is still, we'll start the application process, and we'll try to get the permit approved for the new site as soon as possible after the expiration. I'll have to follow up with you on the actual installation time.
Okay.
But it could be, several months, but I'll find out.
Anybody else have anything to say about this one? I think, Gene, this needs to stay on regular agenda too, discussion agenda. 14 is the Bishop Park Master Plan revision. Anybody want to? Yes, ma'am.
I was able to attend last night for the countywide competition at Bishop Park for swimming. It brought back a lot of memories. You would remember, and Commissioner Dickerson would remember our years at Bishop Park with our children and family. Coach Humphreys from the University of Georgia swim program had asked me about coming, and was the other commissioners were invited. It was sent out by Commissioner Wright. But he took me around the area of the pool where they were having the competitions. It was awesome, brought back those memories also. But the main thing he did was to introduce me to a lot of the coaches, a lot of the children, and one of the things he asked them to tell me about what they love about what they do there and what it stands for. But then he also told them that what we're trying to do is to do a remodeling and an updating on a master plan and to make it bigger and better and whatever. And of course, they were all excited about that. But it was just an exciting time. And Assistant Manager Robert was there. I didn't get to talk to him because I was inside and he was outside, and it was time for me to leave. By then, it was getting time to go home. But I enjoyed it very much. And Coach Humphreys, are you still here? Okay, he came in after speaking time was, but I just wanted to let you know how proud they were about what we're trying to do to make it a bigger pool, certainly, but to make it no leaks in it, for sure. But it was a wonderful evening to see.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't get to go. I actually wanted to get to see Mr. Hiss's children compete. How'd they do?
They did quite well.
Great. That's great. You couldn't say anything else, could you, Robert?
I can go into details, but
Yeah.
people don't want to know.
Okay, unless there's more comments on this, we're at item 15.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to point out again that nothing says that the gymnastics center has to be where it is now. If someone can convince otherwise, it's not relevant to the pool, it's not relevant to tennis. That could be an opportunity to establish a park that includes a gymnastics center elsewhere in the county. So I hope that we can move forward with this plan, but keep it open so that we can keep our minds open about where that gymnastics center might be.
Okay, yes, sir. Anybody else? I think this needs to stay on discussion too, Jean. And 16 is the construction of Phase 5 sale of the landfill.
Should we skip 15?
I'm sorry, we need to move back to item 15. Park facilities improvements. We had talked about parks so much, I thought we'd done it all. Any discussion on item number 15? And these are SPLOST projects. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move
Yes,
on.
ma'am.
Yes, sir. You got to raise your hand
Excuse
faster,
me.
Ms. Jerry.
Well, I wanted to be sure that what I was about to say was true, as it was earlier this afternoon when I looked at this. There is not a single project on the west side, including Ben Burton. Not a single one. So,
Yes, sir.
Mayor, I
Yes,
guess,
sir.
point of correction, I think on facts and issues number 5, there is a talk about putting a pavilion that would accommodate 30 to 40 people at Ben Burton Park. So it would be
Where?
a sub-project.
Okay, I overlooked that too.
Facts and issues number 5 within the agenda report.
Page 4 of the PDF.
okay.
So-
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Hiss. Okay, we'll move on now to the landfill. Anybody wish? Ma'am? I think all these park things need to stay on discussion. Construction of landfill, Phase 5. Anybody have anything to say about that? Sharon?
Yeah, I do, thanks.
I thought surely you would.
But yeah, I
You're our
know.
expert.
Old habits die hard. So I guess one of the first things I noticed, and I don't know that any of the commissioners noticed, but in the staff report, staff uses the Roman numeral 5 to talk about the phase, but when you look at the map, it's actually just the regular numeral 5. I just asked the manager today to make sure it's consistent so we know. I know we've always used, at least, when I was here, we used Roman numerals to delineate between those differences because we have 2 existing disposal areas, 1 and 2. The other thing I guess I want to make sure, a couple of questions I had was the Phase 5 construction, if I understand it correctly, and this is the way we've done it in the past, Phase 5, if you look at the map, is that huge area. Knowing how landfills are developed, typically we have to develop the entire area, but we're only going to be constructing after that whole area, because you have to have the leachate system put in, the under drain pipes and whatnot for the entire phase. But then we're going to be specific to cells 1A and 1B. And I'd kind of like to know where those are. I'd understood, I think, in a citizen advisory meeting, Commissioner Bailey and I think we had a discussion about that those would be closer to phase 1 instead of out further. I also wanted to understand a little bit better about whether or not there's going to be a berm or a buffer on the north side, which would be on the right side of your picture, between us and a gentleman who has property right up to that, because I know that was was of concern. I just wanted to try to make sure, understand what exactly is going to be done and sort of when it's going to be done. So.
Well, and I appreciate your questions, Commissioner, especially in advance. I was able to talk to Suki briefly. Didn't get your berm question answered, but you're correct, and it's a little. It could be misleading the way that the purpose and the options are, because it just says Phase 5, but really it should replicate the language at the top, 1A and 1B. And according to Suki, the only systems that you referenced earlier will be particular to 1A and 1B.
So they're not going to develop the entire 80-some-odd acre or whatever it is?
That was my understanding from our conversation this afternoon.
Okay.
And you do appreciate your suggestions about the map, and we will have that changed and provided to you before the voting meeting.
So we'll know where the cells are in particular. Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Let's also leave this one on discussion since we got some more information coming. Classic Center Authority request for authorization to secure $1.3 million in financing to fund a guaranteed energy-saving performance contract project. Any questions?
I do have one comment.
Yes, sir.
I had a discussion with Classic Center Director Paul Kramer this afternoon, and in finalizing this, they were able to determine some additional savings through some solar and some LED lighting in the amount of $146,000. And so they were going to amend the $1.3 million to $1.46 million, and you'll see that in the agenda item and, of course, the gray block and the strike-through. But they found an opportunity for some more savings, and they wanted to not miss that opportunity.
Anybody have any questions? Okay. I kind of think that might could go on consent agenda, Jane. Okay. 18, proposed implementation of the schedule for the 2020 SPLOST program. Any discussion or questions on that? We just had a work session, so, okay. We'll move on to Government Operations Committee report, and I believe that's Mr. Hamby.
Mr. Harris.
Oh, Mr. Harrod, I'm sorry. Ma'am? I think it can go on consent. Nobody has any questions. We've had a work session on it, so I think we're okay with that one. So, Government Operations, Mr. Harrod, I'm sorry. Took the committee away from you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, as the agenda report suggests, the committee was asked by the mayor to look into the issue of public input policies, work session policies, and meeting time. And we had a couple of meetings about this. And so we have 5 recommendations to the mayor and commission. The first of these was to simply standardize how we take input from commissioners at the agenda setting meeting and at the voting meeting to make them the same with regards to time limits on commissioners speaking. We also thought to make it easier for the public to know when they're getting close to the end of their allotted 3-minute speaking period, that we would recommend having a countdown clock that might be a little bit more visible than the light on the Clerk of Commission's desk. One of the things that has been an issue in the past is sometimes is both taking the time for speakers to give their names and addresses, but also sometimes there's been some issues with trying to get an accurate spelling, for example, of somebody's name into the minutes. And so we had talked about having people fill out comment cards before speaking so that we could accurately capture spellings and those kinds of things. Probably one of the more substantial ones that I think will increase public, the ability of the public to comment on certain issues is to allow public comment at the agenda setting meeting on zoning related items, which we haven't, we may have done it way back in the past, but certainly not recently. And the recommendation for that, though, is for each item to take public comment after the planning director has presented on that particular item, because oftentimes questions that members of the public may have can be answered by the planning director's presentation. And then finally, this would require amendment to the rules of commission. And so if my commission colleagues were okay with issues A, B, C, and D, then the final one would simply be to, it says here direct, but kindly ask / direct our attorney to amend the commission's rules of procedure accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. I think y'all did a great job on this. Mr. Neesmith?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I don't get the countdown clock. I think this works just fine, but I'm not going to hassle over that. I don't get that, what the purpose of that is. Second, having citizen speakers sign a comment card before they can speak seems, it's going in the wrong direction. I can see that we want to get accurate spellings and so forth, so I would say that perhaps we amend that so that they can sign their comment cards after they speak as well, so that we have that for the record. But I don't want people to sit in the audience and have something to say and not be able to do it because they didn't sign a comment card.
Yeah. Well, I think that I was there when the committee was discussing this, and some of these mechanics were talked about, but if somebody didn't have it filled out in advance, somebody could hand them a card if they stand up or whatever. But
Yeah, I mean, as long as we can.
I think it's something we can deal
We
with.
just don't want to prohibit people from speaking for such a
the intent is not to prohibit anybody from
Right,
speaking.
okay.
It's just to
I wanna
make the process a little bit clearer.
I want to make one other point that's related to this. It's about public input into zoning issues. And again, point out that the public has no way of seeing the staff reports on zoning issues before they're heard at the Planning Commission in time for them to make comments. They have to make their comments on the Thursday before the week of the meeting. The agenda is not published until Friday before the Thursday meeting. So they have no way of seeing the staff reports. And if they want to make comments for the record, they have to bring 11 hard copies to the planning department on the Thursday before the Thursday meeting the next week. So this is not something that, I was there in the Planning Commission when we made this rule. This is an unintended consequence. This was because the petitioner, they know what's going on, and we said, you got to have your stuff in the Thursday before the next week's meeting. We did not intend for it to affect the public. And we still have that problem, and that rule needs to be changed.
I don't know about that. I'm having a hard time following what you think needs to be different.
On Friday before the meeting,
Yeah,
the agenda report, the agenda is published
yeah.
on the internet. But comments are due the day before. Okay, so the public doesn't see the agenda.
And that's at the Planning Commission.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the Planning Commission, and this is a problem. So we need to get them to change their rules so that the public has the opportunity to comment on an agenda report that they have time to see. Now they don't even see it.
Planning Commission. And I think, and excuse me just a minute, Ms. Terry, I really think what we were trying to accomplish here is that not necessarily the petitioner, but maybe part of the community or something, it does not seem very productive to come up and make your points on the night something's going to be voted on. So this just gives them another opportunity to talk to us. And I think the reservation that the committee asked for is to wait until after Brad had made his presentation is a very good one. So, Mr. Harrod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for some clarification, so the issue about the comment cards, I agree with Commissioner Neesmith that the way it reads here is really not reflective of the tenor of the conversation we had in committee. So this was really, it was designed to speed things up and to make capturing of accurate spellings of names, etc., more efficient. And so what we were imagining is that people that are in line to come and speak could have a card and they could fill things out and just maybe have a box or something at the podium. Mm-hmm. But certainly, if people didn't do that, that would not be an impediment to speaking. It just, if they wanted to fill out a card afterwards, after they'd spoken, that would be also perfectly acceptable. In terms of Commissioner Neesmith's comment about planning commission meetings, I agree with him. With this particular item, my understanding, I think the committee's understanding, is we were looking at a review of comments really more for mayor and commission.
I understand.
Yes.
But I agree with him in terms of the dynamics of having the public being able to comment at planning commission meetings. And one of the things, we certainly didn't talk about this in the committee, but I think would be a good idea is to have a similar kind of system set up for planning commissioners to take public input in the way in which people can email the mayor and commission on particular items, and it comes to all of us at the same time. That would obviate, to a certain degree, having to take down 11 copies, 11 physical copies of a piece of paper, and having to have them in before the agenda is published. So, I would certainly, if it were the will of the mayor to say, well, let's also look at inputs for planning commission meetings, I have no objection to that. But we were looking specifically at mayor and commission issues.
And that was the request for y'all to look at. Are y'all happy to go ahead and leave this on here and act on this, and then I'll send something back to y'all for the planning commission under another agenda?
Commissioner Parker had her
Ms.
hand up
Parker
first.
was first.
I just wanted to add, I see that you all discussed work session policies, and I don't see the reason why not to streamline our procedures for all meetings we have, work session policy, work session meetings, as well as agenda setting and voting sessions, having them filmed and streamed online so that people can see them, as well as having them in the same building so that people feel more welcome into the process of attending by having it be more consistent across the board. I don't know if you all had any discussion about that previously, but
I think the intent was, with the input, was to have it for both meetings, as far as like having the cards. Is that not correct, Mr. Harrod?
Well, Commissioner Park was talking about the work session, and
Yeah,
we were really talking more in the committee. We were really looking more at the agenda setting meeting and voting meetings of the commission. In terms of the issue of filming, for example, work session, we did not discuss that because that is has considerable budgetary implications, whereas with the exception of purchasing a countdown clock, these do not have any budgetary impacts. And so if we wanted to talk about the issue of filming work sessions, then I think the appropriate time to do that is probably at budget time.
And one of the other issues too is that our work sessions are that they're not interactive meetings with the public. They're for us to get information from our staff and get things clarified for us, and then we come back with an agenda meeting, which does involve the input of the public, and then voting meeting. So, thank you for your input, though. Mr. Handy.
Just a comment, and maybe a way to solve this with the planning commission is, it seems like this is a planning commission decision that needs to go to the planning commission to
their
fix, but
processes.
perhaps having an addendum to this government operations report that makes a recommendation to the planning commission for them to look at their public input process and public input gathering process would be a good thing for them to look at. Am I, or,
Well,
I don't know, I mean, you had mentioned
May I-
that, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Let me,
Yeah, I mean, I've brought this up several times over the last few months
Yeah.
with work requests and so forth, and really gotten no response. And so I'm trying to get a response of some kind here. And so if it's the GOC makes a recommendation, or if we make a recommendation to the planning commission or the planning department to consider these new rules, that's fine. I just want some kind of action from someone.
yeah, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think it ought to come in
And
this.
Jerry, I think it'd be appropriate to add to this, and it could be done with the commission defined option.
Okay.
That we make a recommendation to the planning commission that they review their policy with the same intent that what we
Michael
dealt with
do
here.
that.
Yeah, that's Andy's chair of it.
Yeah. Y'all ready to move on? I think this one needs to stay on the discussion, Gene. So that takes us to the Legislative Review Committee report, and I guess that is you, okay.
So Andy's probably going to.
Yeah, I'm trying to put Mike on a committee that doesn't exist, I guess.
Thank you.
Well, we spent some time reviewing the curfew ordinance and seeing if it needs to be enforced or needs to be changed, strengthened.
21st, Jerry. Number 21st.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one?
No, I think that's one we're looking at.
Motorized vehicles?
Oh,
I'm
motorized
so- I'm
vehicles.
sorry, I've got-
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
even more fun.
Yeah, so you got two things to do. You can start with
We
motorized
looked
vehicles.
at the ordinance for motorized vehicles and realized that the government, including the University of Georgia, is breaking the law with golf carts and so forth on public streets. So we said, well, we better fix that right now. So that's what this is. This is not our final product. This is changing our ordinances so that government entities can operate these non-traditional vehicles on public streets. And that's what this is about.
And that's for official government work.
That's
not-
correct.
Not just for running around the grocery store.
Well, whatever. Yes.
Yeah, so, and that's
It
all.
doesn't
you're-
mean I can drive one to the grocery store now.
And that's all you're covering in this
In this
recommendation
particular-
tonight.
this was just to
But-
get-
But y'all are not through looking
No,
at this
we
issue.
just saw
Okay.
this very
So-
loose
So we'll
end
just
and
bring
decided
the
we
one
better fix it.
item and y'all continue to work.
Correct.
Mr. Harrod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in the spirit of fair exchange is no robbery, I'm going to ask Commissioner Neesmith the question now. I understand that you all are talking about golf carts. Had you talked about those segways, I think is what they called
We're
it?
going to be tackling that next. Yeah, we're headed toward it. It's a
Okay.
complex set of issues.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've been seeing more and more of those segways, but also like the little scooters that
Oh,
they
and
guide with their weight.
And electric
Yeah.
bicycles. And
Oh, yes, so y'all got a lot of things to look at, so. Okay, so we'll leave that part of it in the committee, but move on this one.
Mayor, I had a
Yes, ma'am.
question. I had a question. Public roadways, does that include our greenways?
no.
No.
Well, for government vehicles, yes. For government vehicles, yes.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I had a resident who has a nerve disorder, and he can't get around, on the greenways, and we had a discussion with them about, him being able to use his Segway because he likes to still get out, but he has to have a tag. I
Yeah,
just didn't know
you're-
if we have a formal policy for that.
Yeah, you're getting
or-
down into the woods of policies that
Okay.
we have to look at for
Okay.
the public, and we're not there yet.
And
Okay.
if you don't mind me jumping in, we're talking about four-wheeled vehicles right now, and Segways are not four-wheeled vehicles. That's what we wanted to get that part out of the way
Yeah,
first.
just this one part. But
Right.
y'all are still
Okay,
going to
I
continue
was-
to work on those
Right,
other things.
but
yeah.
with their,
Subject has
the
it.
committee, sorry, Jerry, is going to continue to look at those other types of vehicles. We were just trying to get a policy set for basically golf carts
Yeah.
and
For the
four-wheel.
government.
For the government, yes, yes.
But I will tell you what my intent of giving this to y'all was, for you to include the greenways as well.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Good.
So I guess they're starting with four-wheel vehicles, you'll move down to 3, 2,
Then-
and then
then
finally
two.
unicycles.
Yeah.
And then how fast can you walk?
Hoverboards.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, I think this can be consent, Gene. And you want to do the.
Thank you. Okay, this is about the curfew ordinance. We were asked by the mayor at the urging of the NAACP to change our curfew ordinance and make it earlier. And I think this is for, help me out here, Bill, we were asked to go to 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock for people under 18. It doesn't matter.
I think it was 9 o'clock.
Yeah, and right now it's 11 o'clock. And we had people there from, well, we had Dr. Means there from Clarke County School District. We had Assistant or Deputy Chief of Police there. And we decided to do nothing. And what was compelling about that is we looked at, for example, crime statistics. When are juveniles involved in crime? What time of day? Well, it turns out it's between noon and 5 o'clock. It was the highest incidence of juveniles being involved in crime. It wasn't after 11. We also, the police department told us that they were very concerned about having yet another law to enforce on their community when they believe they have enough. If the kid's getting in trouble, kid's getting in trouble. If he's breaking the law, he's breaking the law. They don't need to go hassle the kid because he's out late. It just, doesn't make for good community relations. So those two things, well, and Dr. Means even talked about, well, we want this, but of course we do have sporting events that last late, and we got to figure out how to make an exception so these kids can get home. So we decided to pass with no action.
Well, basically, you've also brought it to the attention of the public of there being an issue. And did the NAACP representatives talk to y'all?
No.
Yeah, because what their concern was young children that are out at night, not teenagers, even below preteens. But our law enforcement already has the tools to deal with that.
They do.
So we've raised everybody's consciousness. So
Yes,
that's good.
that's right.
Mr. Oh yeah, that can go on consent. Brad Griffin, can you come forward and help us? Too bad we're gonna drop it out of his chair. That's cute.
Kilimanjaro. Mount Kilimanjaro.
Crooked projectors, what that is.
Whenever you're ready, Brad.
Okay. All right, we have four for you this evening. First is a request to amend an existing plan development in a commercial neighborhood PD designation. Subject property, the request really is, there's a piece of this that was previously approved for a mixed-use commercial with residential over the top building in one location, then a second two-story commercial building to be removed completely. The amendment would amend the use allowances on the property to provide flexibility for complete commercial or complete residential occupancy. And then there is some parking. One of the buildings would be completely removed for a parking lot. Subject property here, this is part of the Somerville plan development off of Jennings Mill Road on the Westpark Drive loop. Existing, that's the area outlined in the kind of red and black dashed line is the area where the proposed change would take place within the entirety of the PD. And you can see here, and since then, this is a little bit older area. We've had a few more houses filled in down in this area, I believe. Yeah. But the locations in question are this area of green space here, and then this was the location here where the second commercial building would go that would be converted to a parking lot. And then the building here is really, that was the first commercial office building to go in many years ago, and it is currently existing and occupied. This was the 2005 site plan that was approved, showing this building to be 2 stories, ground floor office with residential units on the second story, and then the second building here two-story, all commercial. The proposed amendment does a couple things. One, it flips the parking in the building in the center, whoops, to where the parking is now in front. The building moves back in that green space area, and then this area turns into a parking lot instead of a commercial building. The flexibility in part that they're asking for is they don't know what they want to be in this building yet, whether it was specifically approved initially for ground floor commercial with residential over. They're saying, well, we may still want to do that, but we may also want to do all commercial, or we may want to do all residential. They have provided us with proposed architecture, albeit one end and one side. This is the elevation that would face the current commercial building, and this is also the elevation that would be for the mixed use, that is a commercial facade on the first floor with residential over the top. We did not get an elevation. If it were to go full residential, for example, it would not look like this. But we don't have an elevation, nor do we have an elevation for the back side of that building, which is the side that would face those existing residences that have been built on the circle. And I think that's where we really got into, the Planning Commission got into the level of concern with flexibility. And I completely recognize that we're having discussions on one item that staff's got a lot of concern and Planning Commission has concern with flexibility here, but not necessarily over on this one. I think this one's a little different because this is an amendment after the fact to an existing PD where we have already had people invest based on a plan and built houses thinking that it was going to be a mixed-use building. So to change downstream versus initiating a PD with flexibility, I think is a little bit different. And then the other big concern that the Planning Commission had was just the fact that they really didn't know if that building goes all residential, what it's going to look like, because we did not have the elevation for that alternative, although they acknowledged that it would be a different elevation, especially on the ground level, because you would not have the very large windows that you saw with the existing elevation. So having said that, the recommendation from Planning Commission was split, but it ultimately was to deny the amendment as submitted.
Mr. Hamby, this is in your district.
Yes,
You'd like to address it.
another one in my district.
Seems like all of them are coming in your district.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but or
right.
I don't know. The Planning Commission, as Brett stated, did have some concerns about the flexibility, and I share those concerns, and I also do see the correlation between this one and the other one and feel like they are related. I mean, a PD is a planned development. It's supposed to give the people around there some certainty about what is going to happen within their neighborhood and within the investment that they made. And when we are asked to put out there the flexibility that this one's asking for, especially, and as well as the other one really, then it kind of lessens the PD process. And there is that concern with that. With that said, however, the petitioner, I think, will be asking for us to vote to table this, and I don't mind doing that for them to have the opportunity to work out some more details and clarifications about what it is they're asking for, or even more elevations for us to look at with regards to the residential part of it. I am hesitant, as Commissioner Dickerson brought up earlier with the other project, about lessening our residential stock in this community. I mean, we had some intense discussions about that at our last meeting, and certainly if that's a concern for people, we ought to look at what we have approved in the past as far as residential goes, and see what those consequences may be if they are taken off the housing stock from that standpoint. So at any rate, all that to say is I'll be making a motion because the petitioner has asked for a motion to table. I don't see anything wrong with giving them the extra time to see if they can come back with something better that is a bit more defined and a bit in keeping with the plan development process.
Thank you. Mr. Neesmith.
And I'll be seconding that motion. I think the developer is asking us to take what is a PD and make it less of a PD with all this flexibility. It isn't fair to the people who have invested there and the need for commercial space along there. I don't perceive it to be big. There's lots of commercial space available, so I look forward to a better proposal.
Anybody else before we move on? Okay, we'll go to the next one, Brad.
Okay, next one is this is the last one we have in the cycle of the personal care homes, special use in a commercial rural. And at the time this was submitted, it also had a future land use amendment with it. This one came in at the same time the other personal care homes from Hope Haven were submitted, all submitted together. The difference with this one was that because it included a land use plan amendment at the time of submittal, the first review cycle is 90 days instead of 30. That's why it's coming to you 2 cycles later than the other ones. They didn't bring this one in any later. Since the time this was submitted, you all have adopted a new future land use map, and the mayor has signed that map, and so therefore, the land use amendment is no longer needed. We went ahead and did it at the time. The Planning Commission met on Thursday. You had already voted to approve the map, but we didn't know if it had been signed yet or not, so we went ahead just for safety and adopted, but that's no longer a requirement, so you will not have an ordinance for a land use map amendment any longer. Special use in the commercial rural zone, the proposal, this one is a family personal care home, which is a little bit larger in number than the ones you were normally looking at, up to 3 clients plus the manager. The family goes to the 4 to 6 range. Again, this one's already built. What has happened with this one was actually submitted and approved several years ago as a hostel use for family members of the members of Hope Haven that live and work there, perhaps out-of-town people that wanted to come and spend a weekend with a family member. This was a place where they could stay together. That use was permitted at the time. There were variances associated with it for that use that were granted, and those variances were specifically tied to the use. At a point, after it was constructed, that hostel use ceased to continue, and then the use was then converted to simply, I think there are 4 residents that live in this facility. Oddly enough, with this one, it's in front of you for a special use because they don't have enough people living there. If they would go up above the 6 number, it would kick it up into the next level of personal care home. It becomes a permitted use, and it wouldn't be here because it's commercially zoned. So a little different than what you're used to seeing. Also, with a personal care home of this type, the variances that were required for a hostel with regard to sidewalks and other things are not, those development standards are not required for a personal care home, so they do not need those variances. Property here located at the corner of Vincent Drive and Newton Bridge, right across the street from the Hope Haven facility. You see there the structure really built in the woods. You really can't see it from the road. This was the site plan that as it was built, and the existing facility on the ground. No changes proposed. Again, just seeking permission to have it classified under that family personal care for the 4 residents. And again, no land use map amendment required, and the recommendation on the special use was a unanimous approval from the Planning Commission.
Mr. Bailey, this is your district. Do you have anything to say?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The only thing that I have a question about is, and when we approved some of these earlier, excuse me, some of the other commissioners added a clause that the ownership remain with Hope Haven. If we're permitting this, the ownership has to remain. It can't be transferred. I don't remember how that was worded.
Had to be, ownership had to be by a 501c3 and operated as a personal care home, as I recall.
That's
Is that what you came up with?
I can get the language for
Yeah.
you.
Right. Well, anyway, I'd like to just pursue that so we're consistent.
Okay.
And I'll
That would
talk.
that would be a commission-defined option,
Yes.
just like the ones before.
Right, and I'll
Okay.
talk with Mike and get the information from him. Thank you.
Sure.
Y'all ready? I'm sorry, Mr. Kurtz, go ahead.
That's all right. Brett, I was just curious, given what you said about the prospect of a larger facility being a by right use, could the owner go in and put in a second structure with additional bedrooms, and that be a by right activity for them?
I think so. I mean, if it, because it kicks its individual family group and congregate. I think if they get to the group level, then it becomes permitted. And that was specifically put in because this was commercially zoned, the same way we have special use requirements for new single-family and commercial, to try to protect the existing businesses from an influx of much more residential. But I think the answer would be yes, that if they changed the use classification to something that was now a permitted use instead of a special use, they could do that, and that would be a by right administrative permit, just like any other special use would be to change.
See.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the,
Okay, and we have 2 text amendments for you this evening. Let me make sure my order's correct. Okay. The first one is a proposal that this comes to you from staff, from the planning staff. It is a proposal for your consideration to allow, basically to create a new use in the use chart and then allow it as a special use only in the agricultural zones. And that use would be what we're classifying as a rural event facility. We've started seeing a lot of interest in these out in the agricultural areas where people would convert, a barn or some type of an outdoor facility for special events, weddings, conference meetings, things like that. The problem that we ran into with the ones when they started to come in, and it's not just an Athens-Clarke County thing, I think we're seeing this in a lot of locations now. The problem is, under our current code, we classify this as a commercial use. Because it's commercial, all of the development standards that they have to meet for a commercial use really completely take away from what they're trying to create there in terms of making it feel like they're in the country. For example, they got to pave all of their parking. So you end up with, they want to park in a field that's maintained and manage it that way. So the real only option for them at that point would have been to ask for a plan development with 2 pages worth of waivers to go through that process. We initially proposed it to the Planning Commission with a little more detail with regard to distance requirements from adjacent property owners, but we also presented it as a by right use if they met all of those requirements, with the ability to ask for special use if they did not. Planning Commission was not comfortable making that big of a leap from no use to a by right use in one step, and so they asked us to go back, modify the distance requirements a little bit, and then just make them special use across the board. So the way that works for you, if one were to come to us, it's a special use, just like you're used to seeing. If it's approved, it has a binding plan, and it's really ultimately your ability to review what they're asking for, evaluate it based on potential impacts to adjacent property owners, make recommendations for conditions if you see appropriate, and then ultimately approve or not. And so that we felt like this offered another opportunity for those much lower residential densities out in the AR for people to have the ability to do something else with their property that would not be impactful.
Mr. Neesmith.
I think the language here is really quite good in terms of being sure that it does what it's intended. For example, no more than 300 persons at the event. If the event's no later than, earlier than 8, no later than 11 p.m. Allow caterers. Rental of overnight accommodations prohibited. So I think this lets the entrepreneurs out there accomplish what they want with a minimal impact to their neighbors, and as a special use, then we get to review that before it happens. So I support this.
Ms. Dickerson.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I've talked to Brad about this probably for a better part of a year or so, maybe 2 now, because it was something that was brought up to me. Out in my district, we have a lot of old barns that have been converted, and one in particular that was the reason that I talked to staff about this a couple years ago. And the question I have, and I did speak to one of the individuals who would be affected by this, and I don't think they were aware at the time of the answer, but the facility I'm thinking of in particular is a barn that's got 3 sides open. So I know before this came forward and they were thinking they were going to have to go through a whole plan development or whatever, their concern was, they were going to have to add sprinklers and all that kind of crazy stuff. When you've got 3 sides open, people are going to, it's a very small footprint. You got a way to get out. Why do you have to have sprinklers? So my question is, one of my questions is, the fire regulations, are they going to be are they going to be specific on a case-by-case basis of a facility, or they're going to put sprinklers in even though there's 3 different ways to get out of that, by taking about 10 steps any direction? Do you know how that's going to work?
Not specifically on a case-by-case basis, but I can tell you that this is still considered, for purposes of plan review and code evaluation, considered a commercial use. And anytime you're bringing members, of the public, into a location like that, it's evaluated accordingly. So we really don't have any ability under the zoning ordinance to make modifications to life safety code requirements. It's another complete different set of codes. So I don't think this is going to afford any flexibility as part of a special use for you all to waive those types of standards if they're otherwise permitted by our fire department.
And what about the number of events? Is it going to be limited? I mean, are we going to say this is because, in the code, we have a major event category for, that's not even major entertainment's not even, but we're doing this minor, or I'm not sure what are we calling this, rural?
A rural event, yes.
Facility. Are we categorizing that? Are we defining that as 6 times a year, or are we going to let it be 52 times a year? I mean, are we putting any limits on that, or is the special use going to be, you can use it 7 days a week?
We did not put any.
Okay.
We talked about it, especially when we were going in under a by right use. But no, we did not. We currently have the temporary special event that's a permitted use across the board that allows you on your property under certain restrictions as a by right use to do something that's a little bit different a couple times a year if you meet the requirements, but that's limited to twice and very strict in terms of during a 72-hour period 2 times a year. Right now, the way this is presented to you, it would allow really unlimited use of that under these criteria. But, the individual special use, that could be a question you could ask. It could be restricted. You start getting into those limitations. Once it becomes a permitted use, it becomes very difficult for us to track really how many times they're using it. Because once they're built and operating, they're not required each time they have an event at that location to check in with us or to get a permit. We really have no way of knowing the number.
Okay. Thank you.
No, Mr. Harry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a very specific question. I just want to clarify. So, under the on page 3 of the PDF, it talks about what is and what is not allowed. So it says restaurants, bars, and commercial kitchens shall be prohibited. However, catering is allowed, and the space may be provided for caterers to store and clean dishware and to warm and serve food items. So if somebody built one of these rural events facility and they wanted to have a food truck festival, where would food trucks fit in here? Because on the one hand, they're kind of a commercial kitchen, but on the other hand, they're also kind of catering.
They're not catering.
They're not. So food trucks would not be allowed at such a facility then?
Yeah, they may be able to do it under the or the 2 times a year under the temporary special event in addition to this, but no, the thinking here was, and it gets into alcohol permitting too with the caterer versus the on-site commercial kitchen. We did not want to allow any type of construction of this facility where it could morph into something. It starts off as a wedding reception venue, but next thing we know, it's Thursday through Sunday night, it's a restaurant, and it's operating accordingly because they had a kitchen in it. So that was the reason for the restriction on the cooking facilities.
That's fine. I just wanted to clarify.
That's a good question.
Andy, you bring up a good question. I want to pursue it because food trucks is another one of those things that's on our agenda in LRC. And I never thought of it. We allow food trucks on private property anytime they want to be there. So I'm not sure that this would limit food trucks in any way.
Yeah.
They can show up now without this.
After our discussions on food trucks and LRC, I agree with Jerry. It wouldn't really restrict participation by food trucks.
And I think we would just have to see ultimately what that language is. From a pure zoning standpoint, we allow food trucks on private property. If we had a complaint that we've got a lot in a rural subdivision that has decided he's going to have a food truck sit in his front yard 4 days a week and sell food.
He's giving us another problem, Bill.
You know, I think, you know, that, from my standpoint, that becomes an issue because we're going to classify that use as not permitted under that zone.
Yeah.
In this, I think I would try too strongly, if we had a request for that type of an event once or twice a year, I would think I would want to permit it within our office under the temporary special event, because they're really not utilizing the structure as much as they are.
Well, I mean, the point of bringing up the question was not to be difficult, but just to make sure we know what we're getting into. And the easiest thing is if you don't want food trucks there, you specifically prohibit food trucks from being allowed at rural events facility.
Could I offer
But
just-
the attorney may have a different opinion.
The definition says that it's for use by various private groups. So if it's a wedding reception, say, I don't think there'd be a problem with a couple of food trucks being there for the customers. But the way this is defined for private groups, I'm not sure you could have a food truck festival because that would be a public event.
Okay. Well, as I say, I like more clarification rather than less, that's all.
Any other comments on this? You're going to talk to us about
I do.
halfway houses?
I do. We recently brought an amendment to you all in our zoning ordinance that eliminated the 1,000-foot restriction on personal care homes, which basically, it just said if you're within that distance, you don't have a process by which you can ask. And we had concerns with that with regard to fair housing. I asked for you to consider just simply removing the 1,000-foot. It's still a special use permit, and you review it accordingly. We then realized after the fact that I think if we would have seen it, halfway houses are something we've really not dealt with very much. From a permitting standpoint, we're starting to see a lot of interest because we've had some changes at state level in terms of them requiring local sign-offs, that you're going to see some halfway houses come to you in the next few months. And that process is defined by the state. They come to you the first time, go through a process just like it's a zoning, but you don't vote on it. And then there's a 6-month period of time, and then they come back to you again for a final decision. Having said all that, and you will see there is a process in place. It's actually a little more stringent even than special use in terms of time. But we have that 1,000-foot restriction under halfway houses too, for the same reasons. We're simply asking you to remove the 1,000 feet. And it still is subject to all the provisions that we can't do a halfway house without, that meets our definitions ultimately without it coming to you.
They're not permitted in all.
Questions?
And they're
comments?
not, they can't come to you in single-family zones, unlike the individual personal care. Thank you.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody else?
Madam Mayor, I don't have a
Mr.
question about that, but before we end the meeting, I do have something I'd like to say.
Sure.
But I want to give anybody a chance to, I just want to mention that before you adjourn the meeting.
We'll let you wind it up when Brad's finished. Any further on this item? Okay.
I'm
Thanks,
done.
Brad.
You're welcome.
got
Thank you,
the floor,
Madam
Mr.
Mayor.
Bailey.
I received some information after Jerry pointing out his concern and me echoing concern about the business owners being involved in the public input on the changes at Chase Street. And I was told by, not by staff, but by one of the activists and people who's very engaged in this, that the business owners that came to the meeting that was so contentious that I mentioned were all invited to individual interviews afterwards using the email addresses they gave at that meeting. And some of them did. And then some of them came to the meetings, the public input meetings for the newer plan as well. Not all of them did, but it does sound like staff made a conscious effort to include the business owners. We just didn't get as many of them there as perhaps we did at the one contentious meeting. So just want to point that out.
Yes, sir.
That I stand corrected a little bit, that staff probably did do a good job of getting the word out to the business owners, but we might not have gotten as much participation as we'd like.
It's still a valid concern, but that's nice to point that out because I think our staff works real hard to do the right thing.
Right. So that's all, I just wanted to mention that before the meeting ended.
Good night, everybody.